911. Where is the crisis? My child. She's just gone. She vanished. I've checked with every friend. She's only 11. When was the final moment anyone actually laid eyes on her? The search for 11-year-old Carly Brucia ended in a heartbreaking discovery. Joseph Smith was seized for her abduction. He was later handed a death sentence. Recently, however, a legal ruling took a sharp, unexpected turn. A judge has now granted him a completely new sentencing hearing. It was a night of massive scale. The Super Bowl drew record-shattering crowds. 90 million viewers watched New England edge out Carolina, 32-29. That infamous halftime show became a permanent, scandalous fixture in pop culture history. For most sports fans, the night's revelry was only just beginning. But a shadow fell over Sarasota as a frantic manhunt was launched. An 11-year-old had evaporated into thin air. The dark truth loomed close. What they uncovered would haunt a family and leave the nation paralyzed. Carly Jane Brucia was born March 16, 1992, in New York. After her parents split, she relocated to the Florida coast with her mother. She still returned north for holidays, obsessed with spending Christmas with her relatives. Susan eventually remarried. People remembered Carly as a ball of pure energy. Her instructors described her as a remarkably kind and gentle student. The school principal simply called her a radiant light in their halls. She loved her cat, idolized J-Lo, and lived for trips to the mall. At her middle school, she was known for her signature, warm embraces. Between choir and sports, she was a kid who found joy in everything. Following a sleepover, she began her trek home at 6:15 that evening. It was a 1-mile walk to join her family for the big game. Before she departed, her friend's mother phoned Susan to verify the solo walk. Susan refused. She didn't want Carly on Bridge Road alone with those crowds. Her stepfather, Stephen, immediately grabbed the keys to go fetch the girl. The neighborhood streets felt strangely hollow and eerily quiet that night. Most residents were sequestered indoors, eyes glued to their television screens. Panic gripped Stephen as he drove. His stepdaughter was nowhere to be found. She had vanished. 1 hour later, she was officially a missing person. 911. What's the location? My daughter. She's missing. She's just gone. We can't locate her. I've reached out to everyone. She's only 11. Tell me, when was the last time she was physically seen? Authorities scrambled to the scene, arriving at the residence within minutes. Detectives scoured the block, interrogating neighbors for any shred of a clue. They focused their questions on the friend Carly had visited that day. Reports suggested that the young girl had seemed unusually bothered or upset. A family dispute had left her desperate to get back to her mother. As word traveled, the search party swelled into a massive community effort. They searched until 3 in the morning. 12 hours had already slipped away. Her classmates watched the school doors, praying for a miracle that never arrived. When she missed class, handlers brought in bloodhounds to catch a scent. A dog named Ruby tracked her scent directly to a nearby car wash. The trail went cold right there. Police cordoned the zone and grilled the car wash owner, Mike Evanoff. He explained the property was wired with movement-triggered cameras monitoring the entire lot. One feed captured the bustling road, but the parking area looked deserted. Other angles revealed absolutely nothing. Then, investigators pulled the files from a unit hidden behind the wash. It was sensor-based. At 6:21 p.m. the hour Carly vanished, the recording flickered to life. A grainy image showed a young girl in denim, a red tee, and a pink knapsack. It was a perfect match for Carly's outfit. Suddenly, a shadowy man stepped into the frame. He appeared roughly 5'8", with dark locks and a distinct ink piece on his forearm. He wore a service uniform with a blurry name badge. They shared a brief, cryptic exchange. Then he seized her arm and led her away. Those few seconds revealed a horrific nightmare. The gravity was chilling. Every officer watching knew Carly was in immediate mortal peril. Her stepfather, Stephen, was summoned to the precinct to face intense questioning from investigators. Susan had asked him to grab the kid while she was walking home. I asked for her location. She was close by, so I told her I'd be there immediately. Stephen sensed trouble instantly. This out-of-character behavior felt like a secret warning. She was obsessive about checking in, so this total radio silence was a massive red flag. Digital footprints cleared Stephen. but he handed over a vital clue that changed the mystery. He recalled prowling Bridge Road for any sign of her when a vehicle caught his eye. A crimson pickup was circling that stretch before it eventually veered into the car wash lot. Stephen then arrived at the friend's house where Carly had initially left. That identical red truck was sitting in the driveway. He was certain it was the Bridge Road vehicle. The predator on tape wore a service uniform common for local tow truck operators. The pickup's owner, a man named Ron, was staying there. Police quickly hauled him in for an interrogation. "She stayed over Saturday night?" "Yes, she did." "Anything happen?" "Sunday morning. I just woke up. Nothing happened that Saturday night. The girls were giddy, but I was crashed in the other room. I just woke normally, rolled out of bed and got ready for my shift." "So you didn't see her once before you left for work?" "Absolutely not." "Is that your work attire?" "No. I wore a jersey yesterday during my break." They shoved the capture at him. "I have no clue. That is definitely not me. There is a resemblance. That's why you're sitting in this chair." "Wow. I'm telling you that is absolutely not me there. Honest. A witness identifies you. Then zoom in. Do what you must. It isn't me. Check my alibi. I'll cooperate fully because there is no way that's me. I mean, that wasn't me. I swear. I'd never put anyone through that horror." "How do we prove it?" "By verifying my exact whereabouts at 6:21. His boss and time cards confirmed Ron was clocked in then. The logs validated him. They searched his truck and found nothing. Ron was officially scrubbed from the suspect list. This left a terrifying vacuum. Who was the mystery man? And where was Carly? Even Susan didn't recognize him. The entire community was paralyzed with fear. The abduction happened 300 feet from bystanders, in plain sight. People were everywhere in daylight. A $25,000 bounty was offered to unmask the kidnapper. Police decided to obsessively re-examine the footage, hunting for a secret hidden in the frames. As they began to rewind the tape once more, a pale yellow 1992 Buick Century crept into the lot, surfacing just 3 minutes before Carly vanished into thin air. Seconds later, that same Buick rolled onto Bridge Road, hovering near the car wash as if the driver was scouting a place to flip around. That fleeting moment became the breakthrough they needed. The investigation suddenly shifted into high gear. The neighborhood transformed as locals flooded the pavement, desperate to bring the missing girl back home. Missing posters blanketed every pole and door, passed along like a silent plea. No stone was left unturned in this collective hunt for the truth. "Carly, if you're listening, I just need you to know I love you. My line is open day and night. I'm begging you. Someone, please, help me find my little girl," her father pleaded. "Carly, honey, if you can hear this, your mom is still at the house, just waiting for the door to open." 2 days of agonizing silence passed. Then, a woman sat frozen as the grainier-than-life car wash footage flickered across her television. She shouted for her husband to come look. The recognition was instant. That face was hauntingly familiar to both of them. It wasn't a stranger. It was a guy they used to do business with. We worked together at the shop. So his whole vibe, the haircut, those specific sneakers, even his gait was unmistakable to me. Seeing him grab for that child felt sickeningly familiar. It was the exact same motion I'd seen him use to reach for a wrench. I knew right then, no doubt. Her husband immediately dialed the precinct to give Vincent Reaver the man's name and where he lived. Detective Reaver and a partner took an undercover car straight to the suspect's front gate. Backup arrived shortly after. A quick word with a neighbor confirmed that the house wasn't empty. Someone was definitely lurking inside. The team hammered on the door, but the house remained dead silent. One officer radioed his boss, looking for the green light to move in. In that tense pause, a background check revealed the suspect was already out on a leash. He was on probation. He'd already burned through 2 chances with his probation officer without being locked back up. Desperate, the cops summoned his supervisor to the scene. 3/4 of an hour later, a woman pulled up. She wasn't an officer, though she was the suspect's own sister. She volunteered to go in and talk him out. Within minutes, the man finally stepped into the light. Meet 37-year-old Joseph Peter Smith, a Brooklyn native and father of 3. On paper, Joseph was just an unemployed man with a dark past. His record was a mile long, boasting 13 arrests in this state alone since 1993, ranging from junk habits to script fraud. He'd already clocked 17 months behind bars in his lifetime. Just 8 days after tasting freedom, he was busted for blow and handed a 3-year probation stint. Years back, he'd even faced serious charges for snatching someone and holding them against their will, though a jury let him walk. Right before Carly went missing, he'd slipped up on his probation rules again. Yet somehow, he was still walking the streets. Interestingly, the woman who spotted him on the news wasn't the first person to drop his name into the hat. Among the 800-plus tips flooding the hotline after the abduction tape went viral, several others pointed the finger directly at Joseph Smith. But there was a glaring problem with the theory. Joseph owned a brown Lincoln, not the yellow Buick wagon that had been loitering near the car wash that fateful afternoon. While some units tracked the Buick's registration, a pair of detectives sat down for a chat with Joseph himself. They pressed him on his timeline, the day Carly vanished, and whether he'd been anywhere near that car wash. He flat out denied it. Then, an officer asked if they could get a good look at the ink on his skin. Joseph turned defensive, demanding to know why he was being targeted and what this was all about. When they mentioned they were hunting for a kidnapper, he played dumb, claiming total ignorance of the situation. That's when they slid the surveillance still across the table. "Sure looks like me," he muttered, "but that's not me." Surprisingly, Joseph gave them the keys to his car and the room he was crashing in. He was unnervingly calm, playing the cooperative citizen. A sweep of his living quarters turned up nothing, linking him to the girl. They did, however, bag a mechanic's shirt with a name tag still stitched to the chest. A search of his ride was more fruitful, uncovering a stash of drug gear. That was enough. Joseph was hauled in for drug possession and for blowing his probation terms. As they were tossing his brown Lincoln, the lady of the house where Joseph was staying pulled into the driveway. Her name was Naomi. She arrived behind the wheel of a yellow Buick station wagon. The cops immediately grilled her about Joseph's movements the day Carly went dark. Naomi mentioned that around 6:30 that night, Joseph was busy arguing on the phone with his estranged wife. His story initially seemed to provide him with a solid defense. The trail went cold again as time slipped away. Suddenly, a massive tip changed everything. Jeff, Naomi's spouse, arrived at the precinct to reveal he was the primary driver of that Buick. He informed detectives that his wife had completely messed up the timeline. Joe showed up asking for the car. I told him 15 minutes, tops. I let him go, noticing he was wearing a mix of gray and yellow tones. The driveway was empty at 6:30. By 7:30, Joe finally pulled in as I was leaving. I demanded to know where he'd been hiding that early on a Monday morning. He looked disturbingly relaxed, as if he'd just enjoyed the best night of his life. His behavior was incredibly bizarre, and the news reports made it all click. Jeff sensed a dark secret hidden within the interior of his vehicle. The items inside were shifted, and the rear seating had been pushed flat. He handed the car to Sarasota authorities for a full forensic sweep. This new testimony crushed Joseph's defense. His story was falling apart. Officers confirmed Joseph was driving then and immediately read him his rights. At that moment, he shut down and demanded an attorney. "We need to sit down and have a real talk. What happens in this room is serious." But he was told to stay quiet. Who gave that advice? On February 4th, Joseph's brother, John, walked into the police station. Federal agents learned that the two brothers had been feuding for years. John claimed that on the night of the abduction, February 1st, Joseph called at 8, followed by a day of total radio silence. John and his girlfriend saw the kidnapping footage while watching the news. The face, the hair, the work clothes, they recognized him instantly. His unique limp, a result of back surgery, was a dead giveaway. Around 11 that night, Joseph showed up at John's house, appearing intoxicated. John refused entry, citing Joseph's past creepy behavior toward his girlfriend's daughter. Though he wore his usual uniform, one specific detail was glaringly wrong. He had ditched his usual sneakers for something else. He wore boots John had never seen before and asked a cryptic question. John shut him out. By the next day, Joseph's co-workers noticed his spiraling behavior. He obsessively scrubbed his hands, even though they were already clean. He warned his boss he might have to flee the state suddenly. John told police that the walk in the video was an exact match. Watching the clip made him certain it was definitely his brother. To find Carly, investigators realized they needed to break Joseph's silence. John warned them that his brother would take his secrets to the grave. If he's guilty, you'll never get a confession out of him. He urged federal agents to focus purely on physical evidence instead. Detectives asked NASA to sharpen the car wash footage to read the name tag. The high-tech enhancement worked perfectly. The badge read Joe, and reports showed he had meticulously planned his route. He purposely hid his movements to get within reach of Carly. The evidence was mounting fast, but then the case took a dark turn. The tables finally turned. They locked Joseph Smith in a room with his mother and brother, the air thick with unspoken dread. That 90-minute session was more than enough time for someone to finally crack. Yet, the secrets of that room stayed buried. When John Smith finally walked out, he was measuring every single breath. He hinted that Joseph was dangling on the very edge of a total breakdown, nearly ready to spill it all. But at the finish line, Joseph just couldn't do it. He didn't drop a single direct line that could actually hold up as a confession. Despite the massive stakes and the potential for a breakthrough, the cops inexplicably let the family walk away without a follow-up. No one bothered to pull them back in for a second round of questions. The investigators failed to log their initial gut feelings or put a tail on them after they left the station that night. Later that evening, John dialed the feds, acting like they were already in on the secret. "So, what's the move now?" he asked, leaving the bureau agents completely blindsided. They couldn't wrap their heads around his cryptic, shaky tone or what he was really trying to get across. John was obsessed with the idea. His line was bugged, it wasn't, and that's when the real picture started coming into focus. It became chillingly clear that Joseph had already reached out to his brother to leak the dark truth about Carly Bruscia. Convinced he was under a microscope, John was now dancing around the facts. He was desperately trying to pass the torch without actually saying the forbidden words out loud. Sensing the clock was ticking, a trio of investigators, including 2 feds, raced straight to John's front door. Inside that cramped, suffocating house, the mask finally began to slip away. John pointed them toward a spot near Interstate 75 on Proctor Road, a location that sounded hauntingly ordinary. Around 1 in the morning, in the thick overgrowth behind the Central Church of Christ, they finally stumbled upon Carly Bruscia. The patch of land was pitch black, lonely, and completely forgotten by the world. She was stripped bare from the waist down, save for one lone sock, her throat bearing the brutal, silent evidence of a life stolen. After that grim discovery, the whole investigation shifted gears. They hauled John back to the station, where he finally dropped the act and admitted his previous story was a total lie. That claim that Joseph hadn't said a word to him? It was pure fiction. In reality, Joseph had looked him in the eye and uttered words that changed everything. "I'm sorry for what I did to you." John claimed their mother couldn't stomach the weight of that admission and fled the room immediately. Once they were alone, Joseph leaned in and started whispering the real secrets. He blamed a hit of what he thought was snow for turning the entire day into one violent, hazy blur. Those weren't the words of a man feeling guilty. It was a cold attempt to dodge the blame, leaving only more questions and a sickening silence. John felt Joseph was too cowardly to admit she was gone, so he finally had to say the words for him. "Fine, Joe. She's dead now. Where is she? We have to find her. Where did you put her?" After walking out of the station, John and his mother drove straight to a nearby church. They paced the property looking for any sign of her, but the grounds revealed absolutely nothing. It wasn't until later that Joseph specified she was actually lying in the tall grass out back. Not inside the building, but hidden where no one would think to look. John later tried to justify his silence. He claimed he figured his brother was just talking nonsense, vague hints he didn't want to believe were real. He kept insisting that Joseph never used the actual word for killing her. John played off their trip to the field as nothing more than a twisted bit of curiosity to see if Joseph was lying. Then he dropped a bombshell that left the detectives floored. He claimed that if she were somehow still alive, he'd have freed her and given her cash to disappear. His plan was to sell her photo to the tabloids and use the payout to hire a high-priced lawyer for Joseph. Eventually, the truth finally broke. Joseph admitted to the sexual assault inside the vehicle. Initial stammers soon gave way to a sickening confession of brutal sexual violence. This admission shattered the defense's narrative. As a massive storm rolled in, officials made the painful call to leave Carly's body overnight due to the weather. They aimed to block news choppers and prevent any leaks from surfacing. Cops got the White House to declare a rare, emergency no-fly zone overhead. Later, the Sarasota County medical examiner arrived to conduct the formal inquiry. Forensics showed she was dragged into brush and garroted. Her wrists bore clear bindings. It screamed total dominance and lethal intent. Genetic material belonging to Joseph was discovered on her red top. Experts cited a 1 in 32 quintillion chance it belonged to anyone else. 2 hairs and 7 matching red shirt fibers were found inside the Buick. He tossed her clothes and pink pack in different bins to slow investigators. Instead, his trail of discarded evidence only tightened the noose around him. Bill Borwell was assigned the crushing duty of informing the family. He met Susan Bruscia privately to break her heart with the ultimate truth. Susan's agony exploded into screams. "He murdered my baby. He murdered her." After that, a visibly trembling Borwell had to address the waiting media. You could hear his soul fracturing as he fought to speak. 11-year-old Carly Bruscia is dead. Joseph Smith is charged with her murder. Relatives and heartbroken neighbors gathered in the shadow of the church. The searchers, now mourners, piled flowers high to honor Carly's stolen life. A heavy, tearful silence fell as their last thread of hope finally snapped. This was no ordinary memorial service. It was a city bonding through the raw, collective trauma of her loss. McIntosh Middle School opened its doors to help students process the horrific news. Counselors stood by to support a community drowning in sudden, sharp grief. Fear turned local parents into shadows, terrified to let kids outdoors alone. Simple, everyday safety had vanished, replaced by a lingering, dark paranoia. A candlelit vigil transformed the Bruscia lawn into a glowing sea of solidarity. Through the hushed crowd, one specific message stood out on every sign. "We love you, Carly." Her father, Joe, stood up to face the supporters. His voice was a hollowed-out rasp as he thanked the community. He praised the searchers and everyone who held his family up during darkness. This wasn't a scripted performance for the cameras. It was a broken father, finding strength in the town's overwhelming embrace. On February 9th, Joseph's mother spoke to him in a recorded exchange. "Joe, just call it an accident," she begged. "It was, Mom," he lied. She asked if he thought she viewed him as a monster. He reassured her. Though he noted the public was out for blood, she warned him that the entire state was watching his every move. On February 10th, a massive crowd, including Borwell, attended the final service. The atmosphere was suffocatingly bleak, the one ending they had all feared. The nightmare they had desperately prayed would pass was now their reality. Smith was indicted for kidnapping, sexual assault, and first-degree murder. Under Florida law, he was now staring down the death penalty. Police Captain Jeff Bell declared they were finally set to ensure the monster faced the ultimate consequence for his heinous acts. During his pretrial detention, authorities snatched a secret message Joseph had tried to slip to his sibling. The note was encrypted, but experts eventually cracked it. It opened with him wishing for something more scandalous to share. "Regardless, I scattered the gear and garments across 4 separate dumpsters, leaving the remains exposed for anyone to find. I hauled the victim to the discovery site. Burn this note immediately." Silence fell once the message was finally unmasked. Before the court dates even arrived, a string of additional deaths haunted Carly Bruscia's relatives, intensifying their nightmare. Her grandmother slipped away, never living to see justice finally face the light of day. Kin claimed her heart simply gave out from grief, a poetic phrase that felt brutally literal in their dark reality. Her grandfather fled to Europe in a desperate bid to outrun the agony, yet death found him there too. The family tree withered piece by piece. Her uncle perished after slamming his pickup into a tree in a fatal collision. Rumors swirled that the crash was no accident, but a deliberate choice to end his own suffering. Crushed by the immense burden of grief, weeks before trial, Smith's lawyer tried to dismantle the core evidence against him. Legal counsel fought to suppress the car wash tapes and the incriminating jailhouse admission Joseph reportedly gave his brother. They maintained that the state's team had been unable to adequately verify the digital media's legitimacy or the precision of the recorded times and dates on the clips. Based on those flaws, The defense insisted such material was inadmissible for the upcoming legal proceedings. Furthermore, they claimed the federal agents conducted an unlawful interview by letting the brother visit after Joseph had already asked for a lawyer. One federal investigator provided a contrasting version of those events. He claimed John was actually the one pushing for the sit-down, curious if his sibling would break his silence. The meeting supposedly only moved forward with the defense lawyer's blessing. Smith's trial finally commenced. The narrative built by the state was somber, but left no stone unturned. The proof consisted of surveillance clips and forensic items pulled from the suspect's vehicle, confirmation of Joseph behind the wheel during those vital hours, plus genetic traces discovered on the girl's apparel. His intimate knowledge of the disposal site sealed the deal. Individually strong, together these facts created an airtight case. The courtroom battle proved incredibly draining and gut-wrenching for every single person in the room. From the grieving relatives to the detectives, everyone pinned their hopes on the system finally working. Witnessing the horrific specifics of the young girl's fate in public was simply too much to stomach. Successive accounts from the stand pierced the heavy atmosphere, haunting every observer who listened. John Smith took the stand, though his presence quickly turned into a liability for the side that called him. Lawyer Deborah Reaver requested the judge label John as uncooperative while he dealt with his own robbery and narcotics charges. Records show that during his time on the stand, he confessed to being high on crack, tanking his reliability. Once the final arguments wrapped, the agonizing vigil started. After several weeks, the jurors emerged with their final conclusion. On December 1st, a 10-2 split decided Smith should face the needle for his crimes. In his final public words, Joseph begged for leniency, citing the impact his death would have on his own kin. However, come March 15th of the next year, the court officially handed down the death penalty. From the second she was abducted, the young victim went through horrors beyond any words. That haunting footage of him snatching her away is burned into everyone's memory. At only 11, she probably knew her situation was dire. Her passing was no twist of fate or mistake. This was a premeditated, chilling execution. Joseph Smith, your choices have permanently revoked your status as a free man. Lord, have mercy on your spirit. Following the capital punishment verdict, Joseph offered some final thoughts. He claimed he wanted it known that the blame for these atrocities rested solely on his shoulders. He professed confusion about the events, blaming a cocktail of self-loathing and a massive narcotics binge. Despite knowing his addiction was wrong, he felt powerless, claiming that day remains a complete blank in his memory. Once the capital verdict was read, Carly's stepdad, Stephen, total closure was the dream. Yet the ache persists. This fix didn't fix a thing. Carly finally found her voice, though her spirit has departed. Now comes the grim vigil, counting the seconds until Joe Smith's end. The mother missed the final gavel. Behind iron bars, she was spiraling through the dark side of the law, trapped by substances and street life. Concrete walls kept her from witnessing the exact second the monster who took her little girl finally faced his reckoning. She eventually broke her silence regarding her personal nightmare. Numbing the agonizing void left by Carly meant chasing chemical ghosts. It was a desperate flight from a crushing reality. That spiral only fueled her collapse, piling new wreckage onto an already shattered existence. With the needle looming, Joseph Peter Smith started pulling every legal lever he could find. A flurry of petitions followed, aiming to flip the script or just cheat the clock. Every legal volley meant endless courtroom marathons, agonizing delays, and fresh wounds for those watching. Initially, his tactics flopped. Judges stood firm, making it seem like the book was finally slammed shut. Then the tides shifted. Despite the first-degree murder stain on his hands, death was the original decree. Yet a judge just hit the reset button on his punishment phase. Blame a high court decree. Now, every single juror must agree before sending someone to the abyss. This doesn't feel like legal logic. It feels like a slap to justice's face. Joe Bruscia is seeing red, convinced the system has completely forgotten the blood spilled and the families broken. Bureaucrats ignore the human cost, but the pain is real. Why should citizens foot the bill for his survival? The Bruscia clan is flooding the top brass with pleas, begging the governor to intervene. Honor the oath. Florida gave us their word, now they need to keep it. End Joseph Smith. He took my little girl's life. It's only right he pays in kind. Back in 2016, federal judges gutted Florida's rules because life and death choices weren't requiring total jury agreement. By 2018, Smith's fate was in limbo before being brought back 2 years later. Fast forward 12 months, and high-level judges just handed Smith another shot at escaping the needle. The court is only debating the penalty, not the guilt. The calendar remains blank for now. I'm merely borrowing this precious soul from the heavens for a fleeting moment. Don Betts finds peace in this sacred corner, haunted by Carly Bruch's memory more than anyone else. Her final resting place was right here, clinging to the edge near this very stone. Tending the church memorial, he sees Carly's face while reliving the haunting murder of his own kin. Grief leaves a void. Finding a quiet sanctuary to sit with those memories is the only true comfort left. News of Smith's second chance at sentencing leaves him torn between conflicting shadows of justice. Taking his life won't resurrect Carly, yet the scales must be balanced to the law's fullest power. Joe slammed the legal system, stating, "The law truly abandoned us. That monster was walking free on supervision long before he hunted Carly. One slip-up should have triggered 5 years behind bars. He tripped the wire, but nothing happened. They caught him unconscious with illicit powder, yet swapped real prison time for a toothless program. Legal semantics paved the way for my daughter's grave. From 2005 to 2021, they've spun wheels without reaching a true finish line. Naturally, I harbor a deep, burning resentment toward this entire legal circus." Diving into the digital depths, Joe realized his nightmare was just one thread in a massive tapestry. He found a brotherhood of broken fathers, all mourning kids taken by predators walking free on parole. The details varied, but the underlying rot remained identical. The rot wasn't localized. It was a systemic collapse that hit him like a freight train. This was a countrywide epidemic. Driven by this truth, Joe pleaded for help from Katherine Harris. He begged for action to ensure Carly wasn't just a cold digit in some forgotten government file. His singular obsession was shielding every other family from that same crushing void and the system's cold indifference. Shortly thereafter, Katherine Harris unveiled Carly's law, delivering a blunt, raw message to the gathered reporters. "We must strike now to keep predators from exploiting second chances to hunt our children again." Co-sponsor Nick Lamson joined the fight, insisting this wasn't political theater, it was a moral debt. "We can't stop every evil," he admitted, "but we're bound to do everything humanly possible to shield our homes." The statute detailed hard, uncompromising steps. Federal convicts would vanish back behind bars if they dared commit another major felony, specifically sexual crimes, against those under 16 or violent acts. It also sought 1 more year of funding for the Amber Alert network, knowing those initial moments are the only hope for bringing a missing child home alive. Yet, the proposal hit a massive, sudden wall of opposition. Everything came down to the bottom line: the price tag. Prison officials claimed locking up men like Joseph Smith would drain nearly $1 billion from the Treasury. That staggering figure acted like a dead bolt, effectively locking the bill out of reach. Joe fired back, calling the financial excuses a slap in the face. "It's sickening to hear them weigh dollars against safety. Nobody gets to put a bounty on my daughter's ghost or any other child's future." Ultimately, Carly's law died not from a lack of heart, but from a crowded legislative clock. The vote never happened. The bill just withered away in that quiet graveyard where hope goes to die. Harris refused to call it a funeral, promising to bring it back even bigger and bolder next time. She vowed the soul of the bill would never flicker out. The crusade to shield the innocent remained the heartbeat of the entire effort. Still, she confessed the net needed to be cast wider to be effective. In her eyes, the law left too many dark corners where predators could still hide. Nothing scars a community deeper than the stolen innocence or the murder of a child. She noted that Carly's loss shattered a whole world, from her bedroom to the state line, making prevention our only option. Her speech felt like a sacred oath, mixed with a bitter confession that the gears of justice had already slipped once. But for all the grand promises and public outcry, Carly's law never actually resurfaced. The movement just evaporated from the official books, leaving a hollow ache and a mountain of what-ifs, mirroring the dark shadows of the case itself. It's haunting to think a full decade has passed since that week, when a young girl vanished from a Sarasota car wash, triggering a nationwide desperate hunt. 10 years ago, the world watched a chilling security tape of a kidnapping. Days later, they found Carly Bruch's body. She was only 11. They found her behind a church, the same place that now fights to keep others safe in her name. Such a grim end for Carly, yet her tragedy sparked a shield for countless others. Stepfather Stephen Candler told the crowd at Central Church of Christ. Her mother, Susan Shorpen, couldn't find the words at the very spot her daughter's life was discarded 4 days after the snatching. Maybe now kids will stay alert and adults will stop blinking. It can happen to anyone. You always think these nightmares belong to someone else, until they're screaming in your own backyard. That desperate search and its brutal ending still haunt the veterans of the force who came to pay respects. Seeing this happen to her, it's the definition of a waking nightmare, but it also forged a steel resolve in us all to hunt him down and see justice served. Smith rots on death row, while for 10 years, this church has been a beacon of community safety, hosting 8 rallies and endless drives, all for the little girl who never came home. We're keeping Carly's flame burning. This will always be a sanctuary for her memory, a place to look back and then look forward, swearing to protect every child among us. Eventually, Paul McWade, Bradenton's second-in-command, publicly confirmed that Joseph Smith was now a prime suspect in a different slaying, specifically the murder of 25-year-old Tara Riley. McWade mentioned detectives might visit Joseph on death row to grill him personally. They weren't just following protocol. They were hunting for secrets buried since March of 2000, when Tara's naked body was pulled from a Florida pond behind Walmart. The spot was hidden yet accessible, not too far from the beaten path, but concealed enough to stay hidden for days. Tips flooded the station, but every single lead eventually hit a brick wall. Bystanders saw Tara in a parking lot, spat right before she died, but their descriptions were too blurry to name a killer. 2 years into the mystery, detectives finally interrogated a man who matched that fuzzy description. However, the interrogation yielded absolutely nothing. Lacking concrete proof for a charge, the investigation flatlined once again. Technically, it stayed open, but momentum vanished as months turned to years. Eventually, the file just went cold. Records gathered dust while the dream of catching the monster responsible slowly withered away. Time blurred the details until 6 years later, when Tara's name suddenly echoed in a wiretapped prison conversation. Phone logs showed Joseph chatting from prison with his mom and brother. The talk was jagged and high pressure. His own family started leaning on him with some brutal inquiries. One question cut deep. Did they grill you about Tara? See, Joseph's brother, John, actually knew the girl. They were co-workers who saw each other daily, and John claimed to know her world better than anyone. He dropped a bombshell. Shortly before she died, Tara had completely rejected Joseph's advances. To John, that ego-bruising humiliation was the secret spark that triggered her brutal murder. "I'm relieved the heat finally forced the law to move," he said. She was a truly decent person. Her future was wide open, and it's a tragedy. "I just want justice served before my brother kicks the bucket." He didn't waver for a second. He was dead certain his own flesh and blood killed her. This wasn't just some wild theory he was spinning. It was the conviction of someone who'd lived with a monster. Then, 17 years after Carly Bruch's death, the headlines exploded. 55-year-old Joseph Smith expired at Union Correctional on July 26, 2021. Silence from the prison fueled a firestorm of rumors. Reports later cited liver cancer, though others whispered that hepatitis C was the secret culprit. Ultimately, the true cause of his death remained a murky mystery. The state attorney tried to stitch up the community's deep scars with a formal parting statement. "Carly isn't coming home, but we're thankful her loved ones and Sarasota can find peace without more grueling court dates in this hunt for justice." Carly's dad confessed that Joseph's death didn't bring joy, it just left him with a complicated, weighty relief. This was long overdue. Since our botched legal system couldn't finish the job, nature eventually stepped in to balance the scales. Even so, no charges ever stuck for Tara Riley's death. It's an open wound, no verdict, just silence. Any dark secrets regarding other potential victims likely perished. Alongside him, leaving only ghosts, scattered clues, and permanent mysteries. John regrets that Joseph never came clean, neither about Carly nor about Tara. He died a total coward. That is the story. Today, family friends are pleading for help to save the garden you see right there. It's wasting away as memories fade. There was a time when crowds tended to 11-year-old Carly's memorial weekly. Today, it's just a trashed, overgrown patch of dirt. Cher Langworthy and her family have spent 3 weeks straight trying to bring it back to life. I need her memory to stay alive. I want this place to serve as a wake-up call for everyone. Parents treat this place like a dark classroom, a silent warning of what lurks in the shadows. While neighbors tended the soil, the stain of Carly's fate left a scar that refused to heal. For Susan, the clock simply stopped ticking the moment her daughter's heartbeat did. The news is out. Susan Sharpen has followed her daughter, leaving behind a legacy of grief. Absolutely. A whole town's heart broke for Carly, and now they gather to mourn the woman who survived her. Susan was defined by a singular, obsessive devotion, a mother's love that bordered on the sacred. That is the haunting portrait Pastor Rod Myers paints of the woman who never stopped mourning. She departed this Monday at 47, leaving Myers with one chillingly clear memory of their time together. The sheriff and I joined her in the dust where Carly was discovered, our prayers lost in that heavy silence. At just 11, she was a mystery unfolding, a life whose chapters were still mostly blank pages. She carried 1,000 unspoken secrets and dreams that withered before they could ever bloom in the sun. Her world was built on promise and the quiet magic of a life just beginning. Carly possessed a strange, magnetic grace, convincing everyone they were the center of her universe. She radiated a genuine warmth, pulling friends into her orbit with a smile that felt like a shared secret. In her presence, the jagged edges of the world softened, making even the ordinary feel safe and sacred. They remember her as a bright, haunting force. That sincerity ensured her memory would never truly fade into the dark. Her essence clings to the living, an unbreakable bond forged in the silent moments that nobody can steal away. Joe, the father, maintains an obsessive sanctuary of photos, ensuring her ghost remains a constant fixture in their daily lives.